710-770-934. If individuals will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes during the public comment period. Again, to make a public comment today during the meeting, members of the public should call 1-408-418-9388. And the meeting ID is 710-770-934. The second option allowed for the public to submit written comments prior to the meeting by mail to PSTA 3201 Sierra Drive, St. Petersburg, Florida 33716. However, to date, it is my understanding that we did not receive any written public comment. The third option allows the public to submit comments via email before or during the meeting at publiccomments with an S at psta.net. That's publiccomments@psta.net. If the emailed public comments received before or during the meeting are 400 words or less, we will read them aloud during the meeting at the appropriate time for public comment. Public comment that exceeds 400 words will be provided to the board members in writing. Any documents that the public submitted to the clerk have been provided to the board members prior to this meeting. All comments submitted will be included as part of the public record for this meeting and will be considered by the committee prior to any action being taken. When addressing the committee, the member of the public must first state his or her name and his or her address. Roll call, excuse me, wrong line here. First of all, I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to confirm you all can speak and see each other, so we will do a roll call for both Finance and Planning Committee members. Richard Bennett.
Here.
Vince Cox.
Here.
Dan Saraki.
Here.
Josh Schulman.
Here.
And myself, Committee Chair Joe Barkley. For the Planning Committee, additionally, we have Darden Rice.
Here.
Keith Sebil. Have we heard from him?
We have not heard from him.
Okay, and David Albritton.
Don't see him yet.
Okay,
Let's see.
are we going to have a quorum?
We have everybody here for the Finance Committee, and we have a quorum for the Planning Committee, yes.
Okay. All right, public comment. Now is the time for public comment on any of the action items. Again, to make a public comment today, members of the public should call 1-408-418-9388. The meeting ID is 710-770-934, or send in a written comment by emailing it now to publiccomments@psta.net. Are there any members of the public on the phone who wish to speak?
Good morning, Chair. There are no members on the phone wishing to speak right now. We do have Clarissa on the line to monitor. Clarissa, could you please confirm there's no public comment? Okay, well, Clarissa's having technical difficulties. I am monitoring the line, and there is no public comment. And Clarissa confirmed before the meeting there was no written public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we're moving on to action items. Members of either committee may ask questions and participate in the discussion on all items, but we need to record the votes by committee. Let me ask the chair of the Planning Committee, Josh Schulman, if it is okay for me to pass the gavel to him when we get to a Planning Committee vote, for him to lead us in the discussion and voting.
That's fine with me. Although as vice chair, if you'd like to keep that, that's fine as well.
Okay. We will do a roll call for each vote and note which committee is recommending the action to the full PSTA board. Please make sure your mic is on mute during the staff presentation. Raise your hand to the screen so I can see it to call on you to ask questions. And when it's time to vote, to help Rachel out, state your name when making and selecting and seconding a motion. Voting will be by roll call. Okay, the first thing on the action items today is to approve the April 15, 2020 Finance Committee minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, or changes to the Finance Committee meeting minutes from April 15th, 2020?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Dan, state your name.
I'll support that motion.
Okay, just to stop for a second, everyone, make sure you say your name when you make a motion or a second, okay? So Dan and Richard, go ahead and say your vote.
Dan Saraki, Mr. Chair, I approve the minutes.
Richard Bennett, I second the motion.
Okay, all right, so now I'm going to call a roll call vote. Richard Bennett,
Yes.
Vince Cox,
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki,
Dan Saraki, yes.
Josh Schulman,
Josh Schulman, yes.
and myself, Joseph Barkley, yes. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, Josh, you want to call a roll call vote on the Planning Committee minutes? Do you have the script? If not, I can do it.
I don't have the script, but I could make it up as I go along. I believe Darden Rice might have a question, though.
Okay,
Thank you,
All right,
Chair
let's-
and Vice Chair.
yes.
In the March 11th meeting minutes for the Planning Committee, there's reference to the future meeting subjects, which I understand since then we've had to make some accommodations and shuffle around. I just wanted to check on the status of the presentation for the shelter deployment plan.
Okay. Brad, do you have an answer for that question?
I'm trying to pull it up. Yeah. I know we had prepared a presentation on the shelter deployment plan. I'll have to follow up with Sandra to see exactly where that might stand now, or when she comes on, she can give an update on where that stands. But as far as giving an update to the committee is really the only thing that's been delayed. The actual shelter deployment process hasn't been delayed.
Okay.
Okay,
Sandra,
Thank you.
do you want to add anything?
okay, thank you.
No, all of that is true, and we are reassessing some of the items in the shelter deployment plan due to an opportunity to get new shelters. And so we're looking at it in a whole new way as well.
Okay,
Oh, great. Okay, well, I move approval of the March 11th, 2020 Planning Committee meeting minutes.
okay, I say your name, Darden.
Darden Rice. I
Okay, great.
move to approve the minutes for the Planning Committee, March 11th.
Okay,
Cox, second.
okay, thank you. I'll make a roll call vote here. David Albritton, rather, excuse me. I believe he's not here.
He's not here. Yeah.
Okay, Vince Cox,
Cox, aye.
Darden Rice,
Darden Rice, yes.
Keith Sabile, he's not here also yet.
Right.
Okay, Josh Schulman,
Josh Schulman, yes.
and myself, Joseph Barkley, yes. All right, so that passes. Thank you. All right, third thing, the 2019 Annual Audit and Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Debbie Leas is going to make that presentation along with some guest stars. So everyone, please mute your mic and hold all questions until the end. And Chief Financial Officer Debbie Leas is going to lead this discussion through the annual audit presentation.
Thank you, Chair Barkley. Let me make sure I think I've got echoing here going on. CLA has just completed the fiscal 2019 audit. This is the first year Julie Lupus our accounting director, has led that audit. She got a lot of support from her coworkers, but a special shout out to Nelson Dort for all the work that he has done to help her through the process, as well as CLA. I'm very pleased to say we have an unmodified opinion and that there were no material weaknesses on the financial audit. We did have one management comment and one deficiency regarding internal control over compliance. I just want to spend a moment on that because those of you who've been on the board for a while know that I have a passion about internal control, and it's something I've had CLA focus on over the course of their time being our auditors. And this is a finding that it relates to missing documentation for our TD customers and related to their eligibility. This was brought to our attention last year during the audit. And by the time we found out, we were partway through this fiscal year, but we immediately took steps to try to correct the situation so we wouldn't have this going forward. So we put into place some measures that included converting the file retention from paper to digital. We have increased our monitoring of our other operators from annual to quarterly. And we've had additional staff people involved with the process for each TD application. Among other improvements, PSTA has just hired on a new director of mobility, who is our very own Bonnie Epstein, who's positioned to make compliance a continued priority. And I will be there along with others to support her in this, and we will be conducting our own internal audits going forward. And today's action item is to recommend the board accept the audit in a consolidated or comprehensive annual financial report. But I'd like to hear from Lance and have him go through his presentation on the audit. I'll turn it over to Lance Schmidt from CLA.
Sounds good. Thank you, Debbie. And I will go ahead and see if I can get my screen shared here. All right, just want to confirm that you guys can see my screen right now. All right, good deal. All right, well, thank you, Debbie, for that great introduction. Just for the record, my name is Lance Schmidt. I did serve as your engagement principal for your audit for the year ended September 30, 2019. Also have with me today Andrew Laughlin, which I think many of you are probably familiar with from previous years. Andrew previously was the audit lead, making sure that you guys had a quality audit. This year he was still involved. He still worked on the NTD AUP report, the National Transit Database report, and was instrumental in helping us get that out quickly this year. So any questions you have regarding either one of those, Andrew and I are here to answer those questions. So this year's CAFR came in at a nice 117 pages. So rather than try to read you the financial statements or try to cover all the highlights of the CAFR, what I've tried to do is summarize just a few of the key points in this presentation today. So if you guys have any questions at all, I'm glad to stop and take any of those questions, but we'll really just want to focus on the highlights. Also, just want to have the disclosure too that certainly we're going to cover some highlights here that are not that are based on, I should say, based on the CAFR and the information included in the CAFR. We always recommend that you take everything we say in light of the entire CAFR, including all the footnotes and audit opinions. So I just want to start off by saying, whenever we say we did the audit, I'd like to recap exactly what that means and what we're doing. The first thing we do is exactly what you think of. The financial statement audit, we're looking at numbers, we're looking at transactions, we're making sure that your footnotes are correct with your financial statements. That's the first thing we do. That's really just the start, though. In addition to that, we also look at both federal and state compliance through the single audit process. So we do a federal single audit and then also a state single audit where we take a look at various programs for compliance. We covered 95% of your federal expenditures and a significant portion of your state expenditures as well. So you got a lot of good coverage here through our compliance audit. I also mentioned that we also do an agreed upon procedures report, which was led by Andrew Laughlin, basically making sure that the information being submitted to them was correct and get good policies and procedures in place. And again, that was a good report as well. We also do an examination report. That examination report makes sure that you're complying with both public depository rules and investments as it relates to your organization. And then lastly, we also do a data collection form, which is basically a form that goes back to the federal government that shows all the various federal expenditures that you had, findings, et cetera. They want to see your audit report. And so we'll be working on that in the coming days. So just to recap the actual results of our audit. The first report that we issue is our independent auditor's report on the financial statements. I'm glad to report that you received an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That is the best audit report that you can receive. We use the term unmodified because it means we're able to say that everything was materially correct, and we didn't have to say except for. Since there were no exceptions to our standard report, you received an unmodified report, which again is a clean audit opinion. The second letter that we issue is our independent auditor's report on internal controls related to preparing the financial statements that I just mentioned. And so we're looking to make sure you have good policies and procedures in place to make sure that all the financial information is accurately captured. If we had any findings, we'd be required to report those. I'm glad to say that we did not have any findings related to the financial statements. So again, very good news there. Then lastly, we also issue an audit opinion on both the federal and state compliance testing that we do. And so with that federal and state compliance testing that we do issue an opinion. You did receive an unmodified opinion. So again, the best audit report you can receive. It's a clean opinion. We did have one finding, which Debbie kind of mentioned and went over briefly before we started, but just wanted to point out that if we had felt that finding rose to the level of being a material weakness, we would have been required to modify your compliance report to say you did not materially comply with this requirement. I'm glad to report that the finding we had did not rise to that level. It was only a significant deficiency. And so we are required to communicate those because we, one, want to make sure you know about it so that you do not get to the point where you actually have a material weakness. And so as far as findings and recommendations go, certainly we make many recommendations or just things that we see. We try to provide templates throughout our process or best practices. So we've done that on the financial audit, but no written findings. Debbie already covered the one significant deficiency that we had. So I'm not going to go over that in great detail unless there are any questions. But we also did issue a management letter comment related to which, if you think about the three levels, you have a material weakness, which is the most severe, a significant deficiency. Those are your two categories of findings. And then we have other best practices and recommendations. We had a recommendation on reconciling salary worksheets back to grant draws and requests to make sure that you're actually capturing all the salary and hours that you can to maximize your reimbursements there with those grants. And so we noticed one example where there were some hours, we'll say, left on the table that could have been reimbursed. The dollar amount was $429, so I don't want anyone to get too worried to think that it was a significant issue, which is why it didn't rise to the level of being a significant deficiency. Any questions on any of those, either the results of the audit or the findings?
Any questions, anyone?
All right. You should have also received what we commonly refer to as a governance letter. I will admit it's kind of a wordy document that covers all the required communication that we have to have with governance. I'm just going to touch on the quick highlights here. If we had any difficulties with the audit, I'd be required to communicate those. I'm glad to say we did not have any difficulties besides there was one small hiccup with COVID-19 that caused us all a little bit of additional work and kind of messed with our schedules a little bit, but we made it through. So again, thanks to Debbie and her team for pushing through to make that happen. That letter will also cover any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. There were no disagreements with management. If we did have disagreements, I'd be required to report those to you. We do ask management, so your executive team, Brad and Debbie, to sign a letter stating that the information that's in your financial statements are true and correct. We did receive that letter. If there were any consultations with other CPA firms, that CPA firm would have to get with us first to make sure they have all the facts and circumstances. We were not aware of any consultation with other firms. And the nut letter also highlights some of the key footnote disclosures that you may want to take a look at just to make sure that you are fully up to speed on the most important items in there. And so, common question I get is, how are we doing financially? The purpose of our audit is not necessarily to tell you the health of your organization, even though that's very common that people want to know. And so I want to give you just a couple of highlights, again, very summarized information that will hopefully tell a story so that you can kind of understand a little more about PSTA and how PSTA is doing financially. So this first slide basically shows expenses over time. So 2017 up to 2019, you can see that there have been increases in expenses, specifically in the area of operations, which is where you want to spend your money. That's where you're actually paying for bus services and salaries for to keep those buses on the road. And so you can see the real takeaway here is that obviously costs are increasing. Ridership's increasing. There's a lot of good things happening at PSTA. And so the second question may be, how are we actually paying for those expenses? And this to me is probably one of the most important slides in terms of telling the story of PSTA financially. And so when you look at this, this is, maybe back up. This is actually a breakdown of your expenses. So you can see your operations is roughly 46%. Administration and finance is only 18%. And so again, if you are familiar with maybe serving in other nonprofit boards, you may say, okay, how much should we have in that administration and finance bucket in terms of our operations? What's important to keep in mind is that if you're trying to compare governments to other industries, is that governments have a lot more regulation and a lot more sunshine laws that require some additional work. So it's hard to kind of compare this across other industries. However, you can compare it against other governments, and I think that you'll find this is very much in line with similar type organizations. The next slide is the source of funds. So how do we pay for all of those expenses? And this really is probably one of my favorite slides. Anytime I visit a new city and I'm taking public transportation, being the accounting nerd that I am, I love to pull up the CAFR of the various transit organizations and figure out whenever I pay for my ticket to be on the subway or the MARTA or whatever type of bus that I may be on at the time, I want to know how much of my ticket is actually covering the cost of that ride. That's what this slide really shows you. And so you can see that when you take a look at passenger fares being roughly 9% of your cost, there's obviously a balancing act there as to how much you can charge for having direct support from the people that ride versus other types of assistance. You can see here, property tax revenue does make up the vast majority of the funding. There was an 8.3% increase in property values this year. So you received, as you saw those increases in expenses, that was largely covered by increases in property taxes just due to increasing values and also new construction. And so, again, if you're trying to tell the story of PSTA, this is helpful because you can, let other members of the public know that, hey, look, this is how it's being funded, and this is really where the burden is at for providing these services. The one last financial slide here, just to provide some more context to how well the PSTA is doing from a financial perspective. You can see total assets for 2019 was approximately $142 million. When you look down at the bottom, you can see what your current ratio is, which is basically, if you look at our liquid assets versus the current liabilities we need to pay out, you can pay all your current liabilities 6 times over, and you can kind of see that trend for the last couple of years, kind of being right in that 6 to 8% or 6 to 8 times range, which is very, very healthy. The other important thing to note is there's no debt for PSTA, which is good. And then when you look at how much of our assets are really just in equity, I think it's important to look at that 2 ways, both with pension and without pension. With PSTA being a part of FRS, your only obligation is to pay in the required amount each year, but you don't actually have that ongoing liability to actually be a burden or to pay in a PSTA. And so when you back out pension from the equation, and again, this was new a few years ago as a new GASB requirement, you'll notice the actual funding or the actual equity position is roughly 89% of your total assets, which is a very healthy and sound organization. So with that, if there were any questions, I'd be glad to answer those. Otherwise, I just want to put a quick highlight of some new accounting standards. Not going to go in great detail. You've probably heard about GASB 87. There's going to be a new lease standard that's going to impact future years. This has actually been delayed a year. And so you have an additional year to prep for that. They pushed that back due to all the COVID-19 issues. And then there's also a new public-private and public partnership standard that if you enter into those, and I didn't put this on here because I think it will directly affect, but it could in the future directly affect some partnerships that PSTA may enter into. And then besides that, there's no big new significant accounting standards. And so I know that was a lot of information that I just threw at you, both financial and some accounting. Just want to publicly say thank you to Debbie and her team, especially Julie, really taking the lead this year on the financials and did an excellent job. And just again, say thank you to everyone for the assistance and working through us during a kind of a difficult time when there's a lot of uncertainty as related to COVID-19. Everyone hung in there and pushed through, and we were able to get it done. So we certainly appreciate that. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take those. Andrew and I will answer anything you have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Lance. I appreciate it. And if we have any questions down the line, we'll relay them to you.
Sounds good. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, this is an action item for today
Yes.
to recommend the reports to the board to accept the audit and the CAFR. And I also want to say a great thank you to CLA for the last 5 years of great service to PSTA and helping us become a much better organization. They're constantly prodding us to raise our and just constantly be better, which is exactly as a CFO I want to see. So thank you very much to CLA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, this is Richard Bennett. I would move that we accept the audit report.
Thank you, Richard. Do I have a second?
Cox, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a roll call vote for the Finance Committee. I'll call the roll. Please state your name and your yes, up or down vote. Richard Bennett.
Richard Bennett, yes.
Vince Cox.
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki.
Dan Saraki, yes.
Josh Schulman.
Josh Schulman, yes.
Thank you. And myself, Joseph Barkley, I vote yes. We have a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, everyone. Please mute your mics again. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to move on to maintenance and commercial batteries. Henry Lukasik and Al Burns. Would everyone else mute your mic, please, and we'll hold all questions to the end. Henry?
Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody virtually. It's been a while. So the action item before you today is to recommend approval of a 2-year with 1-year option to supply 12-volt batteries from Future Plus of Florida. It's going to be a total contract amount not to exceed $360,000, and to authorize the CEO to exercise the 1-year option. So just to clarify, these batteries are not the high voltage batteries that are used in PSTA's hybrid or all electric buses. These batteries power low voltage components such as lights, the ITS devices on the buses, and actually the starters on our diesel buses. These are basically the same type of batteries that you have in your personal automobiles. They're just a lot bigger, seeing that we're using them on transit buses. So I'll pass it over to Al Burns to take you through the procurement recap.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. Good morning, committee members. Nice to see you all virtually. In October of this year, we issued an IFB for batteries. It was in compliance with all our procurement policies. The solicitation was posted on both our website and DemandStar. I was very pleased with the outcome. We received 5 bids from this solicitation. Joseph Cheney, Henry's deputy director, he evaluated those bids to make sure that the batteries that were submitted were technically compliant. And he decided that it was the Future Plus of Florida be awarded. Future Plus pricing was determined to be fair and reasonable. And in your package, you'll see a small table of the breakdown of the option years and how we came up with the amount that we're bringing before you today. The fiscal impact on this is funded by PSTA's operating budget. And the recommendation is, again, recommend approval of a 2-year contract with a 1-year option with Future Plus of Florida for a total contract amount not to exceed $360,000 and authorize the CEO to exercise the 1-year option. If there's any questions, Henry and I'll be more than happy to take them.
Okay, any questions, anyone? Yes,
Mr.
Josh,
Chair.
I see your hand is up.
Yep, thank you. Just a quick question. You said that there were 5 total bids, and that the Future Plus of Florida was selected. Was that because the other ones weren't technically, did they not meet the specifications? Normally there's a matrix that shows the results of those different bids.
Good observation, Commissioner Schulman. The bid table isn't included in there. The other bids, they were responsive. This was an invitation for bid, which means the lowest price. And Future Plus, they submitted the lowest price out of the 5 bids.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
No.
I have a couple of questions here. Al, the first question is that 360 is part of the 3-year program, so it's basically 120 per year. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and Henry, how many batteries are in each bus of this type?
There are 2. They are 8Ds. There's 2 8Ds in them.
Okay, so they run in series just to give more power. Is that the idea?
Yeah, we connect the 2 of them and actually make 24 volt.
Right. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. And what's the average life expectancy on one of these batteries in a bus?
We're seeing about 6 to 8 months.
Okay. And what do we do with the batteries when they are depleted?
So the supplier, Future Plus, there's a core charge on each battery, and in exchange for that, Future Plus is responsible for picking up the depleted batteries, recycling them according to EPA law.
Great. Okay, that was really my question, is the recycling component of it. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I'm going to ask for a motion to approve recommendation of the contract for Future Plus.
I would move to approve, Vince Cox, I would move to approve the contract with Future Plus batteries.
Dan Saraki,
Richard
second.
Bennett. Oh, no, go ahead.
You'll make the second, Richard?
Richard Bennett, I'll second the motion.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to have a roll call vote. This is for the Finance Committee members only. Richard Bennett,
Yes.
be sure to state your name.
Richard Bennett, yes.
Okay, Vince Cox,
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki,
Dan Saraki, yes.
Josh Schulman,
Josh Schulman, yes.
and myself, Joseph Barkley, votes yes. Okay. And so we pass unanimously on that item. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please
Thank you.
mute your phones again. And we're moving on now to Al Burns on the Hastus software review. Al?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, again. Just a little bit of background on this. A couple of months ago, I think back in November, I brought to you an action item for Xero Incorporated. The company's name is Xero, and the software platform that we use is Hastus. Currently, we use Hastus equipment for reporting across the operations group. Hastus is an essential software package that manages the service schedule development and management of all routes and tracks operator service assignments and operator timekeeping related to payroll. So it is embedded inside the agency. We also purchased new modules from Hastus that will help the agency be more efficient. Some of those modules are Automated Time Point, ATP, BidWeb, Self-Service, EPM, FMLA, and majority of these new applications or new modules that have been added, they are done online. So that helps us, that helps the transportation group, James and his group, be able to streamline and be more efficient. And I would call it continuously improving our processes. And that's what this software at the end of the day is all about. We're not bringing before you a contract. We're bringing before you the service agreements. With each software that is purchased, there's additional service agreements for the outlying years. And in this case, it's 3. As I stated before, in November, I brought before you the action items to procure these modules. And now this is another action item for the service or maintenance agreements. We successfully, after bringing that to the board in November, after a very long negotiation process, we finally signed on a dotted line in February, and that brings us up here today. This action item is for 3 years, and Xero has the capacity to perform the work. The fiscal impact on this is it's funded by operating funds. And once again, the recommendation that I bring before you is recommend approval for an amendment for a 3-year agreement with Xero Incorporated for maintenance and support in an amount not to exceed $500,000. If there's any questions, myself and staff will be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Josh, I see your hand.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Al, so these items were purchased back in November, correct? The additional modules. Okay. I recall, I thought and I think we're talking about the same thing back in, when we were discussing these before, asking if there was going to be a additional cost or a service contract with this at the time that we bought these modules. And I thought the answer was no, that they were one-time purchases and we were just going to have these. Is my recollection on that correct? I mean, clearly there's some disconnect there because we have a support contract here. Just not sure where it's coming from.
I would say your recollection is incorrect, sir. And maybe I misinterpreted the question when I was asked in November. What we did was we purchased the actual modules, and now this is the maintenance agreements for each for those modules that we purchased. So it's your traditional software. Every year they do upgrades, patches, etc. to various modules that we purchase for all of our software packages. And traditionally, there is a maintenance and support annual maintenance and support agreement for all software that we procure. So I must have misinterpreted your question, and I apologize about that back in November.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is, what happens if we don't have the maintenance and support agreement based on the fact that we own we bought the modules already? What happens with their operation of those if we don't have a support agreement?
If we don't have the support agreement, we put ourselves at significant risk. and I'll ask Julie or Cassandra to step in if I'm misspeaking. But every year there's upgrades and patches that are done to various software packages. And if we don't have the maintenance and service agreements, we're putting ourselves at risk from the software probably not being able to be optimized as much at its full capacity. Also, if we don't utilize these, there's a call-in features in certain support functions that we would lose if we don't do this on an annual basis. So if Julie and her staff or Cassandra and her staff run into any technical difficulties, they can just pick up the phone, make a call, and then they're obligated. I don't know time frame right from my hip, but I say within 24 hours they have to respond. Cassandra or Julie, am I accurate in that characterization?
You're very accurate. I just wanted to make one statement and then I would turn this over to Cassandra. I see that she's also unmuted. One very valuable service that is included in this maintenance and support is your actual bid activity. And part of this project was to expand and make the bid process more automated, and you do change your bus schedules multiple times during the year. I think I'm just going to turn that over to Cassandra to speak to that.
Thank you very much, Julie. Yes, we use this program several times a year, and this year we're using it even more as we start to change our service and work with the union to run a different kind of bid. And so this is the scheduling software that we use that is the backbone of our operation. And so this support agreement is very important to me and my staff being able to put together the most efficient operation that we can from a scheduling perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have one follow-up question. So, and just a clarification. So originally the modules were purchased from Hastis directly, and now we're adding a service agreement from a separate company to maintain and support those modules that were purchased.
I believe it's all one company. Yeah. So Jiro is the company, Hastis is the program.
Gotcha. So did we buy the original software from Jiro?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Okay, any other questions? Raise your hand. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Al, is this basically 166K per year for the 3-year period, or is there some inflation factor built in over the 3-year period, or how is that the invoicing structured? How do we pay this?
You're correct. It's pretty much divided by 3. I don't want to answer the question about the invoicing because I'm not 100% sure. I have the documents right here in front of me, but I believe that we pay that once a year. It's not like it's billed quarterly. But I want to fact check myself before I commit to that answer.
Okay. And just to kind of bounce off one thing that Josh was alluding to, once we, I think I asked this question when you made the presentation, the previous time, and that is, once we tie in with a company such as Jiro, we're sort of locked in. We can't go to the marketplace and acquire competitive bids from other vendors because every vendor has a different communication system and a different computer system and a different way of handling these payroll and scheduling items. Is that correct?
So I would say you can go out to form RFP or IFB or a solicitation process, but I would say we would do a cost-benefit analysis before we took such action, because it would be a significant, not only financially, but also from a learning curve on the new software perspective as well.
Right.
I would have to retrain my staff, yes.
Yeah, so basically we're locked into these folks.
We are. Mr. Chair, this is Brad.
Yes, go ahead, Brad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the committee is asking a lot of really good questions that I like to ask, like, why do we have to pay these ongoing maintenance fees? We're basically totally held hostage by just a couple of these big software companies, Hastis and Clever Device. But yeah, you're exactly right. Basically, there's two transit scheduling companies out there, and every transit system in the United States and worldwide is either a Hastis transit system or a Trapeze transit system, and then we're beholden to them for these software maintenance agreements for forever. No transit system really switches midstream because the expenses, as Cassandra said, of the staff training and all that are just too high. So PSDA has been a Hastis transit system for 40 years now, and I think we'll be for the next 40 years too.
Okay. All right, thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. Okay, if there are no, Josh, did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had an additional question. And Al, I don't know if you know, do you remember what the original purchase price was for the additional modules?
Yes, sir. Give me 1 second.
I think that is a good question because, what these companies try to do is like sell you all these additional modules and say that they'll, save the world. And then they may not have any additional expenses up front to load up the module, but then they get you on the maintenance agreements. But I will say that, hats off to Al and to Julie for negotiating this 3-year contract with Giro, because I don't think our expenses on, even though we have purchased some additional modules, has gone up very much on the maintenance side, or maybe at all. I think we've held the line pretty much on cost, so that's a positive.
I'm looking at the purchase order that was issued. We issued them a purchase order, and it was for $500,000. And it was broken out by each module. For example, ATP, which is referenced in your packet, that cost $75,000. Bid web was $201,000, and I have the full breakout of that. Of the incremental costs or each line item cost.
Okay, I appreciate that. So it's basically what we're looking at is now $1 million over 3 years for these modules. And I think my big reservation is, I know when we talked about this, I specifically asked, when buying, is this a one-time purchase, or are we going to have to keep coming back and dealing with this? So, and I thought the answer was that it was a one-time purchase. So that's my real reservation here.
I apologize again. When you say a one-time purchase, to me that translates to that. I consider this to be a one-time purchase when we purchase the software. I may have misinterpreted, and I apologize about that. About the maintenance agreement side. So that's my that was my misinterpretation.
Excuse me, I was going to speak to the maintenance agreement side. The maintenance agreement side has been in place, and the real value in the maintenance agreements is Hastis is at, I'm going to say, at the base of our technology pyramid, alongside Clever and alongside FleetNet, which is our ERP program that services literally payroll, maintenance, and HR. And due to changes in Family Medical Leave Act and things like that, these programs have to stay in sync and are constantly modified during the course of every year. And that's what part of the maintenance fee goes for, to maintain these interfaces, number one, and to adapt to the changes that evolve as a result of IRS changes, GASB, FASB, all of the changes that occur that affect payroll reporting and things like that, because Hastis is at the base of that pyramid and has to adjust and then provide also an interface to Clever to get the information about schedules on board the vehicle. So it's pretty complicated, a lot more sophisticated than we would even realize.
Yep. Julie, thank you for that. I appreciate the additional perspective. That was actually going to be my next question, is what is the value of that? And I understand and I agree that there are other moving parts that we then have to comply with, and if that helps. I'm just yeah, I was a little surprised to see the, based on prior discussions, see the item coming up. So, but thank you for the discussion on value.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then I'm going to ask for a motion from a Finance Committee member to recommend approval of the agreement with Giro Inc. Please state your name and your motion.
Richard Bennett, I would make a motion to approve the 3-year agreement with GIRO,
Thank you.
not to exceed $500,000.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Is there a second?
Cox, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Please state your name and your vote. Richard Bennett,
Richard Bennett, yes.
Vince Cox,
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki,
Dan Saraki, yes.
Josh Schulman.
Josh Schulman, no.
Okay, and myself, Joseph Barkley, vote yes. All right, so that passes 4-1. Thank you very much. And next item on our agenda this morning is a Looper contract amendment. And Cassandra is going to proceed with the presentation on this. Thank you. Oh, James. Oh, okay.
Cassandra is right.
Okay. Go ahead, Cassandra.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I muted myself to yell at my children. So just to let you know, the Looper operates under contract with PSTA to provide circulator service in downtown St. Petersburg. This action item is requesting a change to our Looper operating agreement. So instead of 2 Looper trolleys plus the PSTA electric bus, we would now have 3 Looper trolleys on the route beginning as early as June. Overall, this is a savings on the expenses of our own PSTA bus. And so we will be maintaining the contributions from the City of St. Petersburg, the Florida Department of Transportation, and the Downtown Partnership. But this action item is to increase the Looper operating agreement by $315,946 for fiscal year 20, and make sure that those 3 vehicles are able to be operated by the Looper also in fiscal year 21. So that would allow Looper to accommodate that 3rd vehicle from their own fleet, and it results in a small savings for PSTA over the life of the 3-year contract.
Questions? Anybody have any questions? Raise your hand.
I have a question, Vince Cox.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Vince.
Cassandra, how much is the savings with, and also are we pulling the electric bus or will it still remain?
So the savings is about $15,000. So it's a very, very small savings. It's almost a net wash of the costs. But this allows us to take the electric bus from the downtown circulator, and we had originally put it on the downtown route so that we could test the life of the battery, and that those tests have been really successful. So now that the charging plate is finished and ready for us to start using up at the administrative facility, we're now able to put the bus and the electric fleet on other routes. We've tested several routes for the availability of time to charge the electric bus, and so we'll be looking at the routes 4, 11, and the 59 as new test routes for the electric fleet.
Thank you, Cassandra. I think that's a very good move right there. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Josh, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Barkley. Cassandra, I appreciate, this is fine. I just really had a question about how the Looper bills us for usage. Is it by revenue hour or is it at a set dollar amount per year?
It is by revenue hour. And so if they do not operate the full amount of estimated hours, it will be less. So this is a not to exceed, but it is not an absolute.
So, and thank you, that actually leads into my next question. So with the stoppage of service that we've had recently, we're not then being billed anything for the time frame because there are no revenue hours running.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question, Cassandra, and I've asked this question before. I have ridden the Looper numerous times, both my wife and myself going to museums and various venues, but there's a lot of disparity in the quality, for want of a better term, of the drivers of the Looper. Some are excellent tour guides and really benefit the city of St. Petersburg and pointing things out of interest to people who might be from out of town. Some say little or nothing, and some are really friendly and some are not very friendly. And if we're kicking in $1 million a year into this process, I think we ought to have a little bit of control over the quality of the drivers and the scripts that they use as they go from stop to stop or entity to entity. This seems, from my perspective, to be something that would be very important to Mayor Kreisman and the City Commission in St. Petersburg in terms of tourism and that sort of thing. Is there anything we can do about that? That's a lot of money we're contributing to this project.
Well, we don't require them to be tour guides. We can certainly talk to the Looper and express your concerns and your experience. We have not heard that particular disparity between Looper operators, Looper Inc. operators. We've heard that disparity between Looper Inc. operators and PSTA electric bus operators. And so I think you'll see the disparity between sort of the friendliness of Looper drivers sort of go down a little bit. I will tell you that the Looper itself does not give those operators a script, that those operators have developed the script themselves. And for those operators that have been doing it a very long time, those are the ones who probably are speaking the entire loop and pointing out new things. But we can certainly talk to the Downtown Partnership and Looper Inc. About making it a more universal experience.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have comments or questions? Okay. Do I have a motion from a Finance Committee member to recommend approval of a First Amendment to the excuse
Mr.
me,
Chair.
reading the wrong script. Wait a second. Do I have a motion from a Finance Committee member to recommend approval of an increase to the Looper agreement? Please state your name. The motions.
Mr. Chair, Josh Schulman, I move approval of the Looper amendment contract.
Mr. Chair, Dan Saraki, second.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call the roll, and please state your name and your vote. Richard Bennett.
Richard Bennett, I vote yes.
Vince Cox.
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki.
Dan Saraki, yes.
Okay, and Josh Schulman.
Josh Schulman, yes.
Okay, and I also vote yes. Joseph Barkley. So we have a.
No, but what is David putting in his file? What is he telling us?
Okay, so we have mute your mic, please, Dan. Whoever was speaking there. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have a unanimous vote.
What we
on
did
the,
was when I look at the solicitation file, what he did was, he just,
Someone's speaking.
Mute your mic. Please mute your mic, Al Burns.
I've
Okay.
muted him, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, second part of this. Now we bring in James Bradford,
Good morning.
Jolly Trolley contract amendment. James, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, committee members. James Bradford, Chief Operating Officer, here with PSDA. Seeking approval on an action item here for you this morning. This would be an amendment of the trolley services contract. This will be the first amendment we've ever done. The amendment will seek to serve two purposes. One, clarify how we share revenue from advertising between Jolly Trolley and PSDA. And then two, it just provides further guidance for billing documentation that we exercise each month as we reconcile revenue hours from Jolly Trolley. And that just gives us better and greater budgetary controls. So taking it back a little bit, we first awarded the last contract to Jolly Trolley at the February 22nd, 2017 board meeting. At that time, we entered a 5-year contract to provide trolley transport services along the 3 routes, as you all know, in North Beach, South Beach, and Coastal, 7 days a week, all year round. Originally, when we wrote this agreement, it was always intended to be all-encompassing. We had it out to multiple service providers for bid. So under the assumption that PSDA may get a new contractor with the vehicles, we had language detailing a lot of things, including that PSDA would be the ownership of vehicle advertising. So what that means is in exchange for a fair and equitable revenue hour rate, we would collect all the fare box revenue, and we also wanted to see if we could extend our revenue's ability through advertising. Now, as you all know, Jolly Trolley retained that contract and had been in that space for many years. They had built up quite a bit of clientele in that area. All the areas and places we would have gone to, hotels, restaurants, bar grills, that type of thing, they'd already had those relationships established. So it made sense for us to partner, and this way, Jolly Trolley is able to partake and keep doing what they're doing in the revenue from advertising, and then PSDA is also able to enjoy those revenue collections as well. Additionally, for this amendment, we have, and you all have this in your packets here, it's a 3-page document. The 3rd page is just really a signature page. How we bill each month. That just gives us greater budgetary controls. Essentially, we reconcile the numbers each month of what we expect to run for revenue service over the 3 routes, including if spring break is coming up or there's extra services like the Blue Jay shuttle, Sugar Sand, spring break, that type of thing. We just ironed out in better detail of how that'll be billed so that both parties understand it, and then we have control of those dollars. I think I'll stop it there and take any questions you may have.
Okay, please raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay, James, I have a question.
Yes,
Could
sir.
you kind of review where the modification would show itself? In other words, will this increase revenue to us, decrease revenue to us? Is it
Yes.
revenue neutral?
Of course, yeah. This will be an increase in a revenue and advertising revenue stream for us. And essentially, this amendment is going to memorialize what we've been doing all along. So the fiscal impact will essentially be, we'll receive just over 25% of the gross advertising revenues. That's a number that we came up with based on nearly a year's worth of data. Originally, before this amendment, PSDA and Jolly Trolley were splitting 50-50 the net revenues. And for this amendment, it was easier and cleaner to come up with a percentage that is that PSDA will receive a total gross amount, which is essentially the equivalent to what we're getting in net. And what that means is, with the just almost 75% that Jolly Trolley will get, they still have to pay their expenses, their labor, they have to collect on any past due amounts and that type of thing. So that was how we kind of arrived at that number. So, but to answer your question, Chairman, yeah, this will be a plus for us, and it's very comparable to some of our other current advertising contracts that we have out there now.
Okay, define what sources those advertising contracts are. Is that the billboards on the side of the vehicles? Is it
Yes.
some other
No,
source
it's
besides that?
you're absolutely correct. It's all the billboards and advertising we would put on the sides of the trolleys as they go around the North County there and their routes. But yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Any
Thank you.
other questions from anybody? Raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, this is Brad.
Yes.
Hey, I would just like to maybe correct one thing that James said. So it's my understanding that this agreement, our amendment to the contract, will memorialize a practice using slightly different numbers, but it's probably about a wash based on the revenue. We're not going to see a major increase in the amount of revenue.
It looks like we.
I think Brad stalled out, but okay, let's assume it's a wash. Okay. All right, Brad, you might want to re-sign on. Okay. All right. Moving forward, then I'm going to ask for a roll call vote if there are no more questions. Do I have a motion to approve the modification to the Jolly Trolley contract?
Richard Bennett here. I will recommend that we approve the motion on the Jolly Trolley contract.
Well, here's a second.
Cox, I'll
Josh
second.
Schulman, second.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote for Finance Committee members. Please state your name and your vote. Richard Bennett.
Richard Bennett, I vote yes.
Vince Cox.
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki.
Dan Saraki, yes.
And Josh Schulman.
Josh Schulman, yes.
Okay, thank you. And myself, Joseph Barkley, I vote yes. So this is a unanimous vote. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please mute your mics back after you've made your vote selection. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, Diane Randall is going to discuss claim settlements. Diane? Go ahead, please, Diane.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. I had myself muted. Diane Randall, Director of Risk Management. I'm here this morning to obtain approval to settle 2 litigated files. I'm actually going to start with the Brittany Thompson file, where we're requesting approval to settle in the amount of $70,000 to resolve litigation in this case. This accident occurred on November 26, 2015, when our bus proceeded through a traffic-controlled intersection on a red light, resulting in the bus striking the vehicle Ms. Thompson was riding in as a passenger. At the time of the accident, Ms. Thompson was 26 years old and injured her neck and back as a result of the incident. She does have documented injuries to several levels of discs in her lower back, and surgery has been recommended for her. To date, total medical bills for treatment are approximately $76,000 with an outstanding balance of $49,500. The fiscal impact of this settlement is within the established claim file reserves. So we're requesting settlement authority of $70,000 to settle the file and end all ongoing litigation. The second settlement involves Makisha Wells. This is a approval for settlement authority of $40,000 to settle and resolve ongoing litigation. This accident occurred on 4/12/2012 when Ms. Wells was a passenger on one of our buses when the bus made a hard stop, causing her to hit her right wrist on the seat in front of her. As a result of the incident, she developed a ganglion cyst on her right wrist that required surgical repair. The medical bills for this incident total approximately $49,000. For the fiscal impact, the settlement is within the established claim file reserves. However, it is a little different in that because litigation has been ongoing in this case for approximately 8 years, our defense expenses have exceeded our self-insured retention. So this entire settlement amount will be reimbursed to PSTA by our excess carrier. So on this one, I am requesting approval to settle for $40,000 to resolve all ongoing litigation in Makisha Wells versus PSTA. Any questions?
Okay, any questions here? Anyone raising a hand? Okay. Two quick questions for you on the Brittany Thompson case. In this particular case, it seems like the amount is such that we would not even be involved, except that the medical bills exceeded whatever our routine amounts that would be received through our regular insurance carrier or the client or the customer's insurance carrier. Is that correct?
Well, when you're dealing with liability, so if this were to go to trial, the jury would hear what the total medical bills are. When we're settling, we do allow in a court proceeding, we are allowed to take an offset for what has already been paid of those medical bills, but it's presented to the jury as the full amount. When we're settling, we look at the out of pocket that they have and the remaining balance. So her insurance carrier, whether it be an insurance carrier or doctors or settlements, the total balance that's outstanding is $49,500 in her medical bills. But we are liable for this incident.
Okay. All right. In the second case, what amount has been contributed by the excess carrier?
They have not contributed yet. When we do have the authority from the board, it's already with the excess carrier. I'm waiting for their approval. And as soon as they do approve it, we've already paid approximately $25,000 to $30,000 over our SIR. So the total amount that we'll receive back from the excess carrier will be approximately $65,000 to $70,000.
Okay. All right. So this $40,000 is our out-of-pocket cost. Is that right?
No, it is not our out-of-pocket. We'll be reimbursed that full $40,000.
Okay. Very
all
good.
All of our out-of-pocket expenses have come from the actual litigation itself.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion from a finance committee member to approve, to recommend approval of the two claim settlements here?
Richard Bennett, I recommend that we approve the two claim settlements.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second?
Cox, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the roll, and please state your name and your vote. Richard Bennett.
Richard Bennett, yes.
Vince Cox.
Cox, yes.
Dan Saraki.
Dan Saraki, yes.
Josh Schulman.
Josh Schulman, yes.
Okay, and myself, Joseph Barkley, vote yes. Universal or approval on this one. And thank you very much, everyone. Please mute your mics again. And now we're going to move on to our sustainability plan. This is actually a planning committee situation. Heather Chauvis is going to do the presentation. You want to take this, Josh? Do you have the script or no?
Yeah, I don't have a script for it, so I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Okay, thank you. All right, Heather, go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted. Okay, so this is an action item to approve a task work order with one of our general services consultants, AECOM, to help us develop a sustainability plan and action program. So a little background history. PSTA was one of the original signatories to the American Public Transportation Association's Sustainability Commitment Program, and that started back in 2009. In 2014, our board approved a sustainability plan, but I would describe that more as kind of a intent document. It was a few-page document kind of laying out that we wanted to participate in this program and develop our own sustainability program. So the APTA program requires that we collect data on a number of quantitative measures and then also develop goals based on these quantitative measures, which they call target indicators. These relate to greenhouse gas emissions, energy and water consumption, and then recycling and waste diversion. The program also includes less quantitative action items. So those can be more along kind of the social spectrum or some other environmental spectrums that aren't as quantitative. So we then advanced to the bronze level of the commitment program, and then silver back in June 2019. Our current goal is to work towards the gold status, which of course means implementing additional sustainability initiatives and action items. And so the APTA approach for sustainability uses the triple bottom line framework, and that focuses on the environmental and social aspects just as much as on financial sustainability. And that is because many of those social and environmental initiatives also have a positive financial impact. So to achieve silver, PSTA had implemented a number of major projects that had already been programmed and numerous action items. Some of those included a new HVAC system, conversion to LED lighting in our parking lot. We did implement a new recycling program. So we do have a formal recycling program with the big green bins like you see in here. This is obviously a lady in her garage, but we have similar bins at PSTA. We also, as you all know, have been converting our fleet to cleaner vehicles. So we have the hybrid electrics and then now the electric vehicles. And then we also implemented a number of action items, and those include things like enhanced training and wellness programs that help to reduce turnover, which obviously has a positive financial benefit as well. We implemented our scorecard that does include sustainability metrics. We did some bus stop consolidation on a couple of routes, and then we also purchased hybrid staff cars. So those were just items that were included in our application to receive the silver designation. And so now our goal is to go for gold, and that requires us to have an additional 2 to 4% reduction in those 4 quantitative target indicators. We also need to achieve 6 more action items and commit to an additional 14. And some of those include things like solar and green infrastructure. So we've been researching a solar program at PSTA and also working with Duke on some of their solar programs. Another additional action item would be to expand recycling for our riders. And then also to achieve 3 stretch goals and commit to 2 more. And those include things like having an organization-wide policy and action plan. So that's actually relates directly to this action item. And then to also develop a comprehensive measuring and reporting process. So we do expect, because we have kind of already achieved some of those more low-hanging fruit items, that attainment at the gold level will be harder than what it was to get to bronze and silver. So this has led us to look to develop a really formal, thoughtful sustainability plan, and then an action program that looks at new initiatives that may be a little harder. So some of the goals of this will be to formalize our existing sustainability practices into a formal plan, identify specific projects and actions to improve further. We also want to align our sustainability activities with our PSTA scorecard. We already collect a lot of data, and so we hope that some of these sustainability metrics we can kind of track alongside of our other scorecard metrics. And then we'd like to increase engagement across all departments at PSTA. The scope for the sustainability plan includes interviews with all of PSTA leadership, development of a stakeholder working group that will confirm short and long-term goals, and then also vet sustainability actions, policies, and procedures, peer agency reviews and best practices, and then the development of a data reporting tool that not only will track all of our sustainability action items, but also be able to report out in a graphic way. And so we went to identify which consultant we wanted to use. We went to each of our general services consultants and asked them to provide a proposal. And we were really excited. They were all very competitive, but we selected AECOM. They had put together a really great team with national experts. They have a team that includes people from California, Washington State, Atlanta, and so people that have worked not only with agencies like MARTA to achieve the gold status, but with agencies out in California that are kind of far ahead of us. So some of what they proposed was identifying action items that are done elsewhere and helping us look for grant opportunities to implement some of the more expensive sustainability items outside of normal transportation grant funding. And so today we are asking that you all approve a task work order with AECOM to develop a sustainability plan and action program at an amount up to $175,000. Their proposal actually is less than that, but we just put this, just rounded up. And I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions, anyone? This is for the members of the planning committee. Any questions? Okay, seeing none.
This is Darden. I've been raising my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't seen you, Darden. Go ahead, please.
That's okay. Well, I feel strongly about this. Ever since I've been on PSTA as a citizen representative in 2013, before getting elected, I thought it was really important for PSTA to stake a leadership direction on sustainability. And we tend to see across the country where, whether it's a transit agency or a city, we see that the most successful outcomes and programs that are real and have real outcomes are the ones that that leadership has the commitment to stick to over the years. So as much as I wish we would work a little bit faster, I'm glad we're taking the step now, how to figure out, how to get to the next level. And it always begins with, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and then it becomes a little bit more difficult to figure out how to push ourselves to accomplish those policies to really get us into the higher echelon of like silver and gold rated agencies. I know just from my experience on St. Pete City Council, we've had good experiences with the work product from AECOM. I do ask, and this is a friendly question, not a hostile one, but I do ask that this $175,000 result in a proposal or a plan that's realistic and not with something so far out from another, like California, where we want to push ourselves and stretch, but it's not helpful to us to give us ideas which just don't match our political or financial reality. And I would like to see some specific recommendations tailored to PSTA. And And while I don't expect this from AECom, I would be disappointed to see a copy and paste types of things in this document. I want this document to be real. And, but with that, I do make a motion to support this task order and look forward to working with the consultants on developing this plan with our agency. And I'm going to shut off my audio because, as luck would have it, my lawn people are here. So it's getting loud in the background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the motion, Darden. Are there any other questions before we move on? I have a question with regard to this. What exactly, Heather, does the 175,000? Is that just the plan? Is that the ongoing monitoring? Is this a one-year arrangement, or is this an ongoing thing? And I concur with Darden that I'd like very much to see us really develop gold status. And I'd like to make sure that we take the actions necessary to do that if we're committing to these expenditures.
Yes, so we're expecting the effort to take, well, to last until early spring, the engagement with AECom. They, part of the scope that, and this is one thing that we did negotiate into the scope, is the development of this data reporting tool. And so one of our staff members, one of our planners, will be working directly with them in the development of this tool so that PSTA staff, even beyond AECom's engagement, is fully able to utilize the tool and to report out on all of our progress. And some of that reporting will come directly to the board. And then also, we do expect some very specific action items that are realistic for PSTA. I know I did mention California. The reason I mentioned that is because while, yes, they have a lot of policies and programs that help to fund some of their initiatives, there are some very creative solutions that were mentioned in our interviews with AECom that we do think are applicable. And AECom is aware that we have to have action items that are financially viable for us at PSTA. We obviously don't have a huge capital program, waiting to fund all these new innovative projects. So we want to be creative and then also financially viable. And we want to make sure that the benefit cost analysis is done on any projects that are recommended.
Okay. And then my other question is, what is the source of these funds, and does this in any way cramp our budget?
It does not. These were funds that were already programmed through the planning budget. We have a grant for short range planning that we will be utilizing to fund this project.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. If there are no other questions, Darden submitted a motion. Is there a second?
Cox, I'll second that.
Josh Schulman, I
motion.
second.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to make a roll call vote at this point. Vince Cox?
Cox, yes.
Josh Schulman?
Josh Schulman, yes.
Darden Rice?
Darden Rice, yes.
I believe Dave Albritton did not come in to the meeting. Is that correct? And Keith Sabile? Okay. And then I vote yes. So of all the attendees of the meeting, we have a unanimous vote. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda is comments on TBARTA's proposed 2030 plan. Who is doing this? I've got Cassandra, or
Yes,
is
sir.
someone else going to be doing this presentation?
Nope, I'm here. Ready to go.
Okay. All right, very good.
Very much for letting me present this to you today. TBARTA recently submitted their regional transit development plan for our comments. Much like we put together our transit development plan, they were required to also do one after they became a transit authority from a transportation authority. And so we reviewed their document, and the action item before you today is we are requesting that the board endorse the letter that we have drafted and the comments in that letter. So just to give you a summary of that letter, we are in full support of the projects listed in the TBARDA plan. And we have been for a very long time. Those projects are well established within the TBARDA master plan and are included in our TDP as well. However, we have some very significant concerns about the proposed financial plans related to the expansion of these regional services. And so we did look at those financial plans, and beyond the status quo plan, the TBARDA vision options suggest a potential reallocation of state block grants from local agencies to TBARDA. So PSTA currently receives these state block grant funds from the Florida Department of Transportation, and they have a big assistance to us in our local operations. Secondarily, we in the document there is a suggestion that TBARDA would assume responsibility for some regional services that are currently operated, such as the 100X and the 300X. And we don't take issue with them assuming responsibility for operating these services, but believe that it's only beneficial to the region if additional dollars are brought with that assumption of responsibility. And that includes improved service and not just a change in administration and a change in costs. So in this letter, we are making 3 recommendations. One, that TBARDA focus on bringing additional funding to the region, not reallocating existing funding. 2, that they seek dedicated funding from the state for their programs. And 3, more fully engage all transportation partners, including the MPOs and us, in any discussion about changing the funding profile of the region. Just to let you know that since we've drafted this letter, we have expressed these concerns to TBARDA staff verbally. And when the TBARDA board met last week, it seemed that staff had changed their recommendation to the board to be more clearly a recommendation to adopt the status quo plan, and then look at some vision options in the context of what was presented in the TDP. We, however, would still like to bring these issues to your attention because I don't think that they necessarily go away. And we'd like to submit this letter to TBARDA with your endorsement for the record.
Chairman?
Raising your hand? Yes, okay, Darden, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, thank you for that presentation, Cassandra, of this letter. I have to say, I'm really kind of taken aback. I admire your restraint. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I was under the impression TBARDA was always about, you know, taking our ability to accomplish transit on a new regional level with dedicated sources of funding. I never thought their plans were built on cannibalizing local transit agencies. So I'm curious, do you know yet? Do we have other, I would imagine we would be in the same boat with other transit agencies that would be making similar requests to TBARDA. Do you know much about that yet, Cassandra?
As far as our partners, I have expressed these concerns and had conversations with the Pinellas MPO, Whit Blanton, as well as Beth Alden at the Hillsborough MPO, and some HART staff members. I know that Brad also talked to the interim CEO over at about our concerns. I think that some of the outcomes of the TBARDA suggestions are really unknown. And then that's why we didn't feel like we could fully endorse the vision plans until we know what the implications are to us.
Okay.
Yeah,
I move support of this letter, and then I will turn off my mic. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, but I'll need you to hang around to vote in a minute, okay? Okay, all right, Brad, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I just want to echo what Cassandra said and Commissioner Rice's concern. How we as well were very surprised when we first saw the recommendations coming out of their transit development plan. Over the last couple of weeks, I really want to thank Cassandra and our partners, as she said. There's pretty much unanimous concern about this from the local level, from Pasco County to HART to PSDA to the MPOs, and thanks to the TBARDA representatives, both our own Commissioner Janet Long and to the Pinellas representative on TBARDA, Karen Seal, and others who expressed that concern. And so for now, as Cassandra said, the problem seems to be averted. The TBARDA board heard a presentation on Friday that they are not recommending the financial plan that called for taking local funds away from us and others to fund TBARDA for now. But as Cassandra said, we still think it's appropriate to go ahead and make sure our comments are known, our position is known by sending a letter. But the problem seems to be averted for now, and I'm thankful for that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Josh Schulman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I absolutely agree with what's been stated so far. Really, the only issue I have from a planning perspective is the one sentence that says we oppose any funding redistribution that may diminish funding to local transit service. While I agree with the sentiment, I'm interested in seeing what they come up with from a planning perspective, and if something's diminished, what is gained as part of that process and part of that discussion. So I agree with keeping the specific opposition to the reduction that's mentioned, the 10%. But as they go through their plan, while I'm not in favor necessarily of reducing local funding, I want to see what that plan looks like to make a full evaluation of what's being shown. So it really just is that one sentence that says we oppose any funding restriction or redistribution. I don't know what those funding redistributions may look like and what they're used for. So there may be ones that we do like.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? My comment would be to echo what Darden said, and to also ask a question. I'm not sure exactly what is involved in their taking over, the TBARDA taking over the 100X and 300X. Would that involve a transfer of authority? Would it involve a transfer of rolling stock? Would that involve their picking up the tab for those projects? What is involved with that? I'm very reluctant to have TBARDA, take all the good parts of what the different agencies are handling, and at the same time not take over also the funding issues that are associated with that. So Cassandra, what do you mean by the 100X and 300X?
So in one of the vision proposals, beyond the status quo, the two vision proposals did make a suggestion that they would take over the 100X and the 300X. In one scenario, they would also assume the grant funding that is provided from the Florida Department of Transportation from the urban corridor funding. That is not an issue because those are dedicated funds for regional routes. So that does not change our operational profile at all by them assuming the route and that particular funding source. It's the additional beyond what is unclear is beyond that grant opportunity from the urban corridor funding is who is going to fund the remainder of the cost of the service, unless there is an increase in service, which would also assume an increase in the level of funding that they're receiving in order to increase frequency or increase the span of service of those particular routes. So I think it's one of those things where I think we have to see where this goes. And I think that's what we're asking for in this letter is a better dialogue about what exactly they're assuming, and then what funds they're expecting from us. Part of the concern of just taking over the 100X and 300X and then outsourcing that to a private operator or even back to a public operator such as PSTA or HART is that you would then add an administrative layer on top of those services without changing what people and the benefit to the region would be. And so again, I think there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of details in those reports that we're uncomfortable with without a further dialogue. And again, that is the primary request here, is that beyond the status quo, that they have a more robust dialogue.
Okay, Darden, I see your hand being waved. I just want to reiterate my question. Who's going to pick up the tab for the personnel? Who's going to pick up the tab for the rolling stock? Who's going to pick up the tab for the bus stop and parking lots, et cetera? All those things we control right now. Are we going to give up those items in order to be relieved of all the financial issues associated with those operations? Cassandra.
Well, the picking up the tab, that's the part that we're concerned about, right? Because if they're using our stops, who's responsible for those stops? That was not detailed in the plan. They did have rolling stock in their capital plan, but we thought that the rolling stock that they were putting in there and the type of buses that they were purchasing weren't necessarily where the region wanted to go. So they were putting a very low cost rolling stock in there that they would, I would assume, try to get federal funds or use the existing $5,307 that they receive in order to purchase those buses. So they do have a variant of funding sources that they're looking at. Some will be very difficult to achieve, like asking for dedicated state funding. That is first and foremost what we're requesting that they do, is work on that in order to supplement their capital plan as well as their operating plan. They also have in there an increase in the local county contributions. So right now they receive about $500,000 from local counties, and they're asking for that over 10 years to be tripled over time. So that's an ask that they will have to make in order to match any of the other grant opportunities that they might have. You are right in asking a lot of questions, because there are a lot of questions that we have, and we would like a more detailed conversation about those and what their plans are and if they are achievable.
Darden, you were raising your hand earlier.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to address Commissioner Schulman's comment, and I always appreciate his comments, but I kind of differ with him on this one. I think it's pretty clear that we're objecting to funding redistribution that would result in diminished transit service. I mean, that's our mission. That's why we're here. And it just really makes sense to me. We've got to improve the communication. We have to get our stakeholders more engaged with them or vice versa. Because it sounds like they got pretty far down the road with some proposals without checking in with us. And that, it always takes more time and it's more difficult at first to engage stakeholders, but it takes a little bit longer, but we have better end results and end products when we do it the right way. And so I think that's really the right way to go. And I prefer not changing the sentence that Commissioner Schulman mentioned. I think in a case like this, I just don't want to crack open the door a milliliter to a conversation that would seem to imply that we'd be open to funding redistribution that negatively impacts transit service. And I know Commissioner Schulman wasn't saying that, but I'm happy with the way this letter is as written.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, did you want to say something? You're unmiked, unmuted, so I assume you wanted to say something.
No, I'm okay. I appreciate the comments. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Josh, did you want to say something else? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and as always, I always appreciate what Darden has to say, and her additions there. Really, my point when I was reading that sentence, it struck me as being anti-region. And we talk about being for the region and planning for the region, and but we say hands off our pot. And it seems like in some areas we're okay with sharing, and other areas we're not. And I just wanted to, I don't want to diminish local funding, but I wanted to see what could come out of a plan so that we could fully vet a plan and then have specific, like the next sentence talks about specific that we're against.
Okay. All right. I agree also with Darden that the top-down approach of coming in a little strong by the T-BARTA folks is a concern. So I agree with Darden on that. All right. We have a motion from Darden to approve the letter. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Cox, my name is Cox.
Okay, Vince, thank you. All right, so I'm going to call a roll call vote now from people from the planning committee. Vince Cox?
Yes. Cox, yes.
Okay, Josh Schulman?
Yes. Josh Schulman, yes.
Okay, thank you. Darden Rice?
Darden Rice, yes.
David Albritton and Keith Sabile are not here, and I, Joseph Barkley, vote yes, so it passes unanimously with the players who are here today. All right, thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to turn the mic over to Brad Miller, who's going to give us an update on the general operations. Go ahead, Brad. Brad, you're muted. Start over. Unmute yourself and start over.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let me get my screen up here. Okay, can you see the screen? Let's see. Jeepers, I don't know how to do this here. I really don't want to have full screen. Okay, can you see my screen? The agenda, PSDA logo, etc. I can't tell.
No.
No, we cannot.
Okay. Struggling with this. Okay, how about that?
Let's start. There you go.
There you go.
Okay. I don't know why it's not starting here.
Click from beginning in the top left corner.
It is clicked. There we go. Okay, I'll try to go fast. I know we're all getting antsy, and we've already lost Commissioner Saraki, but there are a couple things I really want to just update all of you on regarding this presentation. But and I really sincerely apologize. Julie and the whole IT department has been helping me. I've really had a lot of internet problems throughout this call, but maybe that's just the way things work these days. I did like the auditor at the beginning of the meeting's idea, and it's a new requirement of the finance committee members that I am going to require every time you ride another public transit system. When you go even overseas, you have to immediately open up your phone and pull up the CAFR of that transit system and analyze it. I thought that was a great idea, and we're going to start doing that at PSTA. I'm going to talk a little bit about, just briefly, about all the things that PSTA has been very nimble and successful in doing to keep our system safe, about the plans for reopening or restoring the service that we scaled back, the immediate financial outlooks, which we don't know everything, and Debbie's going to talk about that a little bit. And then I do want to finish with a discussion about an immediate challenge that we have, but hopefully we're seeing a positive success conclusion regarding CareRide, our partner in our paratransit service. So again, like I said, so far, so good. That is the message I really want you to take away. PSTA has made a number of major changes to our service and operations, and they've proven successful. Our service is been scaled back. We have lots of different social distancing activities going on that I'll quickly speak about. And so far, and I count over 800 individuals, from me and you, the 15 board members, from Commissioner Cox, who I know has been tested a couple times, to all the way down to all 800 of our employees, no positive tests so far. And that is really remarkable. Our expenses are being carefully controlled. I want to thank everybody, all the PSTA folks. We're going through our budget process now, and on the expense side, we have some really good news to share. As far as our capital projects, our major initiatives, there are tons of major things going on throughout all of the organization, from the sustainability things you heard about, from our BRT project, of course. All our capital projects are on schedule. Only things that I really think that are not on schedule is some of our bus deliveries, because the bus manufacturing system in the United States has pretty much all been shut down, and that is just slowly reopening. But other than that, everything is moving along, and in some cases faster. We do have a plan for incrementally increasing restoring the service while maintaining social distancing into the future. The big unknown right now, the thing that we just can't predict, is the revenue side. We have lots of different information from what's going to happen at the state of Florida. Are they going to have a special session this summer? Are they going to cut the budget? Gas taxes, which is how transportation is funded, is way, way down. So we are expecting some hits to our revenue side into the future. But thankfully, the federal government came through, and we are in the short term, we will have balanced budgets for this year and next year, we're projecting, because of the federal CARES Act funding that all transit in the United States received. And last, we're going to talk a little bit about CareRide. CareRide is essentially a casualty of the coronavirus, sort of indirect pandemic. CareRide is owned primarily by the BayCare Health System, which has been taking some major revenue hits through this pandemic. And CareRide will be dissolved, will go out of business, but we hope to have a good transition with them that I'll talk about later. So again, the number one thing for you to know about what's going on with the transit system in Pinellas County is that we are working to keep all of our riders safe, but we are an essential service for the community. There is a presentation of a survey we just recently did that's in your packet of riders. And that shows that the vast majority of our riders have really no other option to get around the county other than public transportation. And many of them are either they're all essential workers, or they are taking essential trips to medical appointments, to the grocery. And then as the economy opens back up, we are starting to see an increase in riders. For 2 months now, all drivers have been required to wear masks, have gloves, face shields, hand sanitizer. Henry Lukasik reports that perhaps PSDA has more PPE equipment than FEMA does at this point. We were thankful to get all the barriers installed on our buses. That's been a great thing for the pandemic. We are sanitizing the buses 3 times more than we previously were doing. We cut back the service to Saturday level service on the weekdays and Sunday level service on the weekends at the end of March. And we started limiting the number of riders per bus to only 10 riders so that they could keep socially distanced in the seats on the bus. And that has proven to be successful. All riders must get on the back door to keep the social distancing activities. And we've even taped off seating at our transit centers, put 6-foot markings on the ground at our transit centers. Lots of things everything is about social distancing, as we all know, and that is in place full force. And I don't see that going away anytime soon at PSTA. We are getting, I think, tomorrow, 15,000 bandanas. There was a little confusion. Those are not bananas. Those are bandanas that we're going to start handing out to our riders. So soon, all of our riders will be given face coverings. We recently did a survey that about 25% of our ridership seems to be wearing masks. We are really putting the word out. We really want folks to wear masks everywhere when they're outside, especially on our buses. That I've heard some stories that is helping. James Bradford told me a story that the bus had about 8 people on it. These 2 women got on, they all had masks, and then 2 new young women got on the bus without masks, and the rest of the ridership looked at them and glared at them and shamed them, and they got off the bus. I think the more we can encourage folks to wear masks and demonstrate that, the better we'll be into the future. As far as administrative employees or every other employee, it's mandatory to work from home if they can. And more PSTA employees are working from home. The building is closed. We eliminated all drivers' lounges and maintenance lounges, places where people congregate. The way it works now is people come to work, they sign in, and they go right, and if they have any time, they sit on their bus. They don't sit and socialize in the building. Of course, we have a travel ban on travel. They're really all the conferences that we normally attend have been canceled anyway. And again, all these activities have led to a great success, knock on wood. That may change, of course, and we have a plan if it does, but no positive tests amongst a population of more than 800 people in total. As I mentioned, the capital projects that that we're working on are all moving forward, some moving faster. This is a picture of our first station for the BRT on St. Pete Beach at the County Beach Park. And that has now been completed as of this week. And basically what we did was we built a new entrance off of Gulf Boulevard for just the buses. And the Central Avenue trolley will start operating out of that County Beach Park, that station, starting on June 7th. The Bus Rapid Transit project is out to bid, and we will hopefully award a contract for the remainder of the construction of the BRT at the June PSTA board meeting. We've gotten a lot of good interest from contractors on that. Federal funding has not been secured yet. That's the big question. But we've been having Zoom calls and phone calls ever since the pandemic started with FTA. And just last week, I think Abhishek and I heard some very positive news. Essentially, the FTA has signed off on the PSTA BRT project. And now it has been pushed up to the Secretary of Transportation level, the US DOT level, for all transit funding across the country. We're waiting on an announcement that they are going to release the funds that they have. And we're very hopeful. We've heard from congressional sources that we'll hear that sometime in the next, any day now. As was mentioned earlier, our electric charging station is complete at PSTA's headquarters, and we're going to have a ribbon cutting with Commissioner Barkley, hopefully in early June on that, a socially distanced virtual ribbon cutting. There's lots of activity down in the maintenance department where the finance committee approved, the board approved new bus lifts to be installed, and that's made things very dusty, so that encourages people to wear masks even more down in maintenance. We've got a new solar panel project with Duke Energy that is going to save us money by us getting more renewable energy for PSTA. And of course, the grant applications continue. The Cassandra's group has done a great job in submitting for more electric buses, for our Clearwater intermodal station funding, etc. This is our ridership picture, and this is the first time in my life, as you know, I'm kind of a transit guy. Maybe you've noticed that. This is the first time that I've asked people not to ride the bus. And we really have tried to insist on essential riders only for PSTA. As you can see, in the month of March, ridership started plummeting. The little valleys on my graph, those are the weekends. So it's every single day you could see ridership was declining in March. It kind of flattened in April, and then you can just see over the last week or so, as the economy has opened up in Pinellas County, as the beaches opened up, we're starting to see a little bit of ridership growth on that. And so that is the reason that on June 7th, we will be restoring some service. This past Friday, because the beaches opened up and we started seeing crowds, and we were having to leave people behind because of the 10 passengers per bus limit, we added back the Jolly Trolley on Clearwater Beach. We're talking with the city of St. Pete now about starting the Looper up again as the restaurants open up in downtown St. Pete. On Sunday, June 7th, we will be adding back buses to our top 10 highest ridership routes because we're seeing more and more people on those buses. We're having to put out extra buses every day now because more and more people are traveling. Our incremental restoration plan will be constantly led by the direction of health officials from the county, from the governor's reopening plan. We are working very closely with our union. All of these changes take a lot of interaction with our employees to communicate how they're being done. I want to thank James Bradford, is on the phone daily, hourly with April Murphy and the union leaders as well to communicate on their plan. And finally, the partnerships the PSTA has had for a long time with the Florida Public Transit Association, APTA, our benchmarking group. We're constantly learning from other transit systems around the state and country what they're doing and sharing our results. And that has proven very beneficial to allow PSTA to be relatively nimble in dealing with this pandemic as things change almost daily. I'm going to pass it on to Debbie to kind of give you what we do know and what we don't know about our financial forecast. Debbie?
Thank you so much, Brad. we're halfway through the year, a little more than halfway through the year, and in your packages, we have the financial statements for March. And even with COVID-19 starting to impact us during the month of March financially, we finished the first half of the year with a $4.3 million positive variance to our budget. And even with no fairs, we are balanced through mid-year and through April. We start to really see in April that the no fairs has come down about close to $900,000 on the revenue side, which we'll talk about. But we are controlling expenses. Expenses are down in almost every category except supplies, where we're buying for the sanitizers and the different things that are keeping us really safe. Areas that were really down expenses, below budget, salaries and fringes are down, overtime is down, diesel fuel is way down, and that is helping significantly. And something that Brad will be talking about in a minute, the dark costs are well below budget. And it's really thanks to our staff who are thinking outside the box, such as our planning department, did to leverage our partnership with partners such as Uber for an essential workers program. This program is for essential employers and businesses whose employees rely on the bus, but because of either expanded business hours or the fact that we have less span on PSTA bus service, the employees are not able to get to and from work. So we are not only working with the employers, we are working with the employees to use existing services such as our TD Late Shift and the Direct Connect programs if possible. And just one last thing on the fuel piece. As I mentioned, we are well below budget, and we are already locked in next year for about 2/3 of our fuel usage in next year. That's going to help to really reduce our costs as we go forward. And Brad, I'd ask that we go to the next slide. I think we lost Brad by sharing.
We're just waiting for Brad to rejoin us. He's having a little technical difficulty this morning. If you
That's
want-
all right. We do not need the slide for me to keep talking. That never stops me from talking. One of the things that Brad had mentioned that for me is a huge question mark for the future is the revenue side. And I think in the short term, possibly even in the long term, is our state funding. We receive a little more than $10 million each year from the state. And a big piece of that is the block grant money. We get about $4.7 million of block grant money that goes to fund all of our routes. And this comes from FDOT, which is funded by the gas tax revenue. I don't know about you, but I know I've very rarely gone to the gas station lately. So we know that is taking a huge hit. And, not only are we buying cleaning expenses, that's on the positive side, but we have labor negotiations that are starting for our supervisory group. And we're really unsure what the future of employee compensation is going to hold. One other area that I'm looking at that I have concerns about is property tax revenue. We're a little bit behind so far in this year, and I'm concerned where that will go, but we'll have more information as we get into June to be able to present to you. But we are very, very grateful and thankful that the federal government has provided for the CARES Act to help us through our revenue decreases. While the federal government won't pay for lost revenue, what they're saying is they'll cover the expenses in your operating budget that would have otherwise been paid for from these different operating sources. And if we continue with no fares, that will have about a $5 million impact alone in this year's budget. So we will be able to make that up from the CARES Act and be able to pay for all of our safety components that we've been buying for our operators and for sanitizing all of our areas. I am very confident that not only in fiscal 20, but for fiscal 21, we will be able to balance the budget. So between the two, we are looking good between lower costs in the CARES Act, we believe that we'll be fine in the short term. It's the long term that has a lot of good question marks in it. I think Brad is back. I think. Is Brad returned?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. So
I don't know. We're moving on here.
that's all right. Brad. I got us through the CARES Act, and you are up on Care Ride.
Gotcha. Okay, let me get through here. Okay. Trying to get the presentation to show, but just takes an hour. Okay. I will just quick. I will skip to the Care Ride. Before I go on to Care Ride, I just really want to express my gratitude to all of the PSDA employees. I can't say that enough. They're from the administrative employees to the drivers to the mechanics. Everybody is really just doing a fantastic job, from saving money on the budget to doing social distancing. This is, as we're all dealing with, it's not easy, and they have been incredibly nimble through this. We're basically getting two kinds of complaints. We're getting complaints and compliments. 50% of the feedback we're getting is the bus passed me by and it's not picking me up. And that's obviously because we have to have social distancing. And then we're getting all these compliments saying, thank you for being out here. Thank you so much for getting me to my essential job or to the grocery or to the doctor. Now, as I know Chair Barkley and I know Commissioner Cox, who have been working with me for a long time on this, know our partner, which provides the vast majority of our paratransit rides, Care Ride, has in the past, for the last several years, has had some financial difficulties with the contract that they have with PSTA. PSTA has a 5-year contract with Care Ride. We are halfway through year 4 of that contract. 2 years ago, Care Ride was sold to Baycare, the large health system in Pinellas County, who now owns a majority of Care Ride. And Baycare had great plans. They thought they were going to make a lot of money and expand the system, but that has not come to pass. And now that the coronavirus pandemic has hit and Baycare is seeing major revenue losses from a health system, they have decided to close down Care Ride, to put it up for sale. Anyone on the PSDA board, you could buy it. You'd have to leave PSDA, of course, but you could buy it. It's for sale. And they want to close it down as soon as possible. So we've been negotiating with Care Ride for the past several weeks, and thanks to Debbie Elias for taking the lead on this. We need time. We cannot have Care Ride closed down because it will seriously impact thousands of individuals in Pinellas County who have no other way to get around. Care Ride is by far the largest wheelchair accessible fleet in Pinellas County. There just is no one else that can step in immediately and provide wheelchair accessible transportation. The people can not ride the bus, they can't drive a car, and they need to get to really life or death medical appointments, some of them. So we've been negotiating with Care Ride now, sort of past the point of trying to keep their company solvent for the long haul, and just asking for a transition period so that Al Burns and Debbie and we can all work toward getting a new contractor in here to Pinellas County as soon as possible. And just yesterday, I understand that Debbie had some successful, finally some successful discussions with the finance team at Baycare. And we have an agreement that, let me articulate to you what the tentative agreement is, that this we'll have to bring this to the PSDA board once we have a legal document put together that memorializes it. So in order to keep Care Ride going through June 30th of 2021, which is what we asked for, because it will take that long for us to get a new company in here, new wheelchair accessible vans here. We think there will be delays due to the coronavirus, but
I think you froze, Brad, if you can't hear. We'll give Brad a second, and if not, I'll pick up. All right, I'll continue where Brad has frozen himself there with his technical difficulty. You're back, great.
yeah, you can't see my, oh, maybe you can see my slide, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know when I was lost, but basically there's two things that we will be bringing back to the PSTA board at the June meeting in an agreement to keep Care Ride going during a transition period of the next year. One will be an increase in the amount that we pay them per ride, accelerated to this July 1 to 2020. We have in our contract a automatic increase in the payments to Care Ride to go in place on October 1st. Instead, we're going to move those forward to July 1st of 2020. In addition, we're going to pay them more. We're going to increase the payments to them for ambulatory. That means non-wheelchair. That means people that don't have a device and they can use a car. We're going to increase the payment to them for those trips starting July 1st. We're not estimating that to be a lot of money. We are thinking in the neighborhood of $50,000 max this year. Due to the coronavirus, ridership has really plummeted on Care Ride, so we don't know how fast that will continue, but about $50,000 of additional funds this year, maybe $75,000 next year. And then in addition, during the last 3 months of Care Ride's existence, which will be next April, May, and June of 2021, PSTA will agree to keep them solvent, essentially, up to a not to exceed a maximum amount that the board will approve. We don't expect that they will need any funding. Their own finance division has projected a profit for them next year with the increased funds that we're hopefully going to give them starting July 1. So Debbie and the Baycare finance folks don't believe we'll have any additional expenses to, quote, keep them solvent through the end of the transition period. Now, I want to assure the committee that all hands are on deck. We are very focused on getting a new contractor in place on this. James Bradford, Bonnie Epstein, our new director of mobility, Al Burns, Ross Silvers, Debbie Elias, and myself, we've been meeting almost daily on this. We have a plan to get a procurement out on the street, get a new contractor in here to replace Care Ride, and ultimately transition smoothly. For those of you who may have been on the board 4 years ago and remember Yellow Cab, there are some serious challenges with a non-smooth transition. If we don't have a smooth transition that we experienced before and we learned our lesson, we have to make sure for our customers' health and safety, we have to ensure a smooth transition. That's why we need time. We've asked Care Ride for time to transition to a new provider. I'll just stop by saying it's very sad for me because Care Ride has been such a great partner of PSTA for almost 20 years now in some capacity. in my own transit experience, they've been one of the best, most customer-oriented contractors I've ever worked with. And it's just kind of sad that this is the end of that great relationship. But it's something we have to do. I want to thank Chair Barkley, also Ken Welch and Janet Long for making phone calls to Baycare officials. I think that did the trick in getting them to agree to this plan. I'd be glad to answer any questions from anyone, as long as I can stay on this computer.
I have a few comments and questions, all right? Commissioner Cox.
Okay, go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, I want to elaborate a little bit on this because many of you know that I worked there for many years and I left several years ago. But essentially what happened here is that Caride became a victim of their own success. When they took over the contract from Yellow Cab, people weren't calling in because they couldn't, or initially they weren't calling in because they couldn't depend on the ride. Well, the word got out, all right? And where the projection from CareRide was about 400 rides a day, that's what they were doing. And it just kept jumping up and up and up. And they had to buy more vehicles, ambulatory vehicles, and what happened then were their wheelchair vehicles. So that being said, I looked at the financials and we're at PSTA 250,000 under budget for March paying CareRide. And I believe, Debbie, I'll ask you to answer this. How about April too? I really hope that this does work out, and because there's so many people that need the service, very sick people. And so that being said, that's all I have to say right now, but I just hope this works out. Right, thank you.
Yeah, if I may, you asked the question, how are they through April? On a year-to-date basis through April, we have, we're about $1 million under budget on what we're paying CareRide. So it's significant.
It's significant, I would think, to any vendor to, still try to maintain. But I think the point I want to make was this: it has been ongoing, and I attended a meeting with consultants that were addressing this. It was about 5 or 6 months ago that Mr. Miller and had arranged for, and I was invited to the meeting. I was thankful. And the focus was to lower ridership, which would both benefit PSTA and benefit the vendor CareRide, because some folks really need to be vetted before they are approved for these kind of trips. They could truly either drive themselves or ride the bus or so on and so forth. So, and right now we're at a standstill with that. But I think there needs to be a particular focus on vetting potential clients for paratransit. Thank you.
Everyone, I've got to leave the meeting. I've got another meeting I have to attend. I'm going to ask Josh Schulman to take over the meeting at this point. I had no idea this would run this long. Is Josh still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, would you please take over, Josh?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Are there any additional questions or
may I add something? This is Commissioner Cox.
Please do, sir.
Okay, I'd like to just ask Mr. Miller at what I mentioned about is where are we in our application process? And I know this is a very unusual time in our history of PSTA. However, at some point in time, that needs to be addressed if it's CareRide or any vendor. If we have like unlimited access, if an applicant that really doesn't need the service,
right,
is not screen property. Could you just tell me where we're at, Mr. Miller?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Your comments are duly noted, and as you know, PSTA has been focused on completely revamping our application process to, as you say, basically lower ridership on CareRide, especially folks that are ambulatory or don't need a wheelchair. That has been the big challenge, and we are taking advantage of our partnerships with Uber and Lyft to create a whole new program at PSTA to, one, make better decisions on what kind of transportation everybody in Pinellas County needs. Not everybody needs to ride on a CareRide, wheelchair accessible, expensive vehicle. Many people can ride on a Lyft or Uber ride, or they can actually ride the bus. And so we had a plan to go into effect to launch a completely new eligibility process on May 1st of this year that was then suddenly hit with a pandemic. Now, luckily, the pandemic has had the same effect of dramatically lowering rides on CareRide. We set goals with CareRide on the number of rides we wanted to reduce, and we've hit those goals. Not thanks to anything PSTA did, but we've hit the goals because of the coronavirus has really dropped ridership, and they're actually, we believe they're making a profit right now because they just had so few, ridership is down so much. But just in the last 2 weeks, we've decided, well, hey, this coronavirus is going to be here for a long time. We need to get this new eligibility process going, even during the stay-at-home, social distancing time period. So now we have a plan in place. In addition to getting a new contractor, Al Burns is going to be very busy because we got him. He's getting us a new contractor to replace CareRide, and we are developing a phone consultation process with our employees to launch by July 1st, this whole new process over the telephone rather than wait until we can do in-person consultations, which we don't know when that'll happen. So we've got a very aggressive time period. In just about a month, we think we'll be able to put this new eligibility process, which will dramatically reduce the number of people that are approved for full CareRide paratransit. Hopefully around July, on the 1st of July.
I have a question. May I, Josh, may I ask a question of Debbie Leas, please?
Yes, please continue.
Hi, Debbie. In your meeting with the CFO or the financial people with Baycare, did they make any mention of their losses recently? May I just ask you?
Yes, they have. They are actually losing money and have been losing money. And that's one of the reasons that they were looking to get either out of this or have been a contract 5 or 10 years, which we legally can't do. So they were actually, I think, quite relieved to see an end date to this. And of course, they're in business. They want to at least break even. And that's what we're trying to get them to through what we're recommending, is to at least a break even.
I would think with these losses over the last couple of months, that could put a nail in the coffin too. I don't see where they would be making any money when they're $1 million under budget for the rides. But it's just a comment and a question. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any additional questions or comments?
I have none. Josh, thank you.
Yeah, I think it might just be you and I left. And then there were two.
I think
so.
Commissioner Rice was still on. I think Darden Rice is still here too.
So the remaining items, and thank you, Brad. Oh, hi, Darden, for that check-in there. Next, we have the monthly reports, but I also believe, Debbie, you covered a good bit of this in the prior presentation. So is there anything that you wanted to add, either you or Brad?
I don't think so. I guess maybe the one thing I will say, we do have our health insurance report in there. And we'll be coming up on our renewals, and we were doing extremely well with claims up until about a month ago. And of course, we have a stop loss, but we did have one claim that would have cost us $900,000 if it were not for the stop loss. So I always hate to have those things happen to anyone, and that will probably impact our renewal rates, but I am anticipating renewal rates will be I think contained based on an overall good news that we've been having with claims and claims costs being down this year. But other than that, I think we've pretty well covered it, and it's there for your reading pleasure.
Thank you, Debbie. Brad, is there anything that you wanted to add with the ridership reports?
I know I sort of covered that in my presentation. Thank you.
I figured. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anything out. Any other business? Nope. All right, then seeing none, I will adjourn this Consolidated Finance Planning Committee meeting. Thank you all, and be safe.
Okay, thank you.